A story of courage, kindness, and the promise that changed everything. The highway outside Redwood Valley, Oregon, doesn't get much traffic after 4 in the afternoon. Most people know that. Most people plan around it. The long stretch of Route 9, flanked by towering Douglas firs on one side and a gravel shoulder that crumbles into a dry creek bed on the other, is the kind of road that swallows sound whole. Wind moves through the pines like a whisper. Birds call to each other across the silence. And on most days, the only thing walking that road after school hours is memory. On a Tuesday in late September, it was also walked by one 8-year-old girl named Lily Harper. She was small for her age, the kind of small that made teachers worried and bullies overconfident, though both groups had, over time, learned to underestimate her at their own cost. Her backpack was stuffed with 4 library books she hadn't asked her mother's permission to check out because she already knew the answer would be, "Lily, we don't have room for more dreams right now, baby." So she'd carried them home herself, the way she carried most things, quietly, without complaint, with that particular brand of stubbornness that looks, from the outside, almost exactly like faith. She was thinking about the books. Specifically, she was thinking about the one on human anatomy, the one with the full-color diagrams of the heart that she'd flipped to 3 times in the library before finally tucking it under her arm with the kind of quiet determination that librarians learn to recognize and silently respect. She was going to be a doctor one day. She had decided this at age 6 when her baby brother had been sick for a week, and she had watched the doctor's hands, calm, certain, gentle, and thought, I want hands like that. I want to be the kind of person whose presence makes the fear go down. She didn't tell many people about this dream. Dreams, she had noticed, made some adults uncomfortable. They smiled too big and then looked away too fast, like they were trying to protect you from something. So she kept hers folded up small and carried it the same way she carried the library books, close to her chest, slightly heavier than it looked. The sound, when it came, didn't register as danger at first. It was too loud for that. Danger, in Lily's experience, usually came quietly, in lowered voices, in the soft click of a door being locked, in the way her mother's face went still and unreadable sometimes when the bills came in. This sound was nothing like that. This was the world tearing itself open. Metal hitting asphalt at 60 miles an hour makes a sound that rewires something deep in the brain, ancient, animal, and Lily's feet stopped moving before her mind had caught up with why. She turned. The motorcycle was already still, lying on its side 40 yards ahead of her, one wheel still spinning with a kind of desperate, useless energy. Gravel scouted across the road like thrown coins. A cloud of dust rose slowly in the amber September light. And beside the wreckage, half on the shoulder and half on the asphalt, was a man. He was enormous. Even collapsed, even broken and bleeding, there was something about him that took up more space than the space he occupied. His leather vest was dark, black, and worn soft with years, and covered in patches that Lily couldn't read from where she stood, but that she understood, instinctively, carried weight. His arms were covered in ink from wrist to shoulder. His face, turned toward her now as he registered her presence with fading eyes, was the face of a man who had spent decades making sure other people were afraid of him. "Run," he rasped. His voice was gravel and rust. "Get out of here, kid. You don't want to be near someone like me." Lily stood still. Later, when people asked her about this moment, and many people would ask in many different ways for a long time after, she would struggle to explain what happened inside her in those few seconds. It wasn't that she wasn't scared. She was. Her hands were already shaking. Her heart was doing something loud and disorganized against her ribs. Every self-preservation instinct she possessed was sending up flares. But underneath the fear, quieter and somehow stronger, was her mother's voice. "We help people when they're hurt, baby. That's not something we decide about. That's just something we do." She had been maybe 5 when her mother first said that, cleaning up a neighbor's cut with their last box of bandages, explaining to Lily why they were doing it even when they didn't have much to spare. The words had gone in somewhere deep and taken root. And now,
Standing on a lonely stretch of Route 9 with a bleeding man telling her to leave, Lily Harper discovered something important about herself. She was the kind of person who stayed.
She crossed the distance between them before she fully decided to. Her sneakers crunched on scattered gravel. She dropped to her knees beside him, pulling her sweater over her head with the efficiency of someone who had watched enough medical documentaries to know that pressure was the first thing, the most important thing. Always apply pressure. And she pressed it hard against the wound on his side. He made a sound, sharp, stunned. Not from pain, or not only from pain, from surprise. In all his years of commanding rooms and highways and the particular kind of terrified respect that follows a man like him through the world, nobody had ever surprised him the way the small girl surprised him by simply refusing to go. "You need to leave," he said again, but weaker now, not because he had less conviction, but because something in his voice had broken loose. "My mom says we help people when they're hurt," Lily said quietly. Her hands were trembling. She kept them pressed firm anyway, even when we're scared. She looked at his face when she said it, directly, the way children sometimes do before the world teaches them that looking too directly at a person is a form of vulnerability. She looked, and she saw past the ink and the leather and the hard-built walls of a lifetime spent being feared, and she saw a man in pain, not just physical pain, the other kind, the kind that lives behind the eyes and doesn't have a name, but that everyone at some point recognizes in another human being because they have felt it themselves. He saw her see it, and something in him, something that had been locked and armored for longer than he could remember, went very quiet. "Stay awake," she whispered. She reached out with her free hand and hooked her tiny pinky finger around his hand so large, hers so small, the connection so fragile and so absolute. "Pinky promise, you won't leave." A man who had built his entire existence on the currency of fear and strength and hard-won loyalty, a man other men did not dare look at directly, made a pinky promise with an 8-year-old girl on a lonely highway and meant it with everything he had left. "What's your name?" he managed. "Lily." "That's a good name." "I know," she said simply. "What's yours?" He almost smiled. "Marcus." "Okay, Marcus. I'm going to run and call for help, and then I'm coming right back. Don't close your eyes." "Kid, don't close your eyes." She ran. She found the gas station 3/4 of a mile down the road, and she burst through the door, and her voice didn't shake once when she told the man behind the counter exactly what she had seen and exactly where it was and exactly what he needed to do. Then she turned around and ran back. She had promised. She sat beside Marcus on the gravel shoulder of Route 9 for 23 minutes while sirens gathered in the distance. She talked the entire time. She talked about the library books and the anatomy textbook and the diagrams of the heart with its 4 chambers and the way the valves work like doors that only open one way. She talked about her mother and her baby brother, and the apartment where the radiator made a sound like an old man laughing every time the heat kicked on. She talked about her dream, the whole dream, unfolded, the way she never let herself unfold it for anyone else, because she needed him to stay present, and she understood, somehow, that the best way to keep someone tethered to the world is to show them something worth staying for. She talked until the paramedics arrived and gently, firmly moved her back. She watched them work on him with the focused, serious attention of someone filing everything away. She did not cry until she was in the back of a police cruiser being driven home to her mother, and then she cried quietly with her forehead against the window because she did not know yet if the pinky promise had held. It had. Marcus survived the night, the surgery, the recovery. He survived because a child had pressed her sweater against his wound in the 12 minutes that made the difference, and because somewhere in the fading, a pinky promise had kept him from letting go. The next morning came gray and cool, fog still sitting low in the valley. The sound started before dawn and built slowly, the deep, rolling rumble of engines that Lily's neighbors heard first as distant thunder, and then, as the sun broke through, realized was something else entirely. By 7 in the morning, both sides of Lily's street were lined with motorcycles, 89 of them, chrome glinting in the early light, engines going still, one by one, until the silence was enormous. Neighbors watched through windows. Nobody came outside. Fear, when it manifests in that particular form, 89 leather vests on a quiet residential street, has a gravity to it that keeps feet from moving. Then the riders dismounted and removed their helmets. One by one, in the kind of deliberate silence that carries more weight than any announcement, these men, roughened and weathered and carrying histories that would fill hard books, stood bareheaded in the morning air in front of an apartment complex on a street they had no business being on, because a little girl who lived there had refused to leave one of their own on the side of a road. The vice president, a man named Deke, built like a structure rather than a person, carrying a reputation that preceded him by several miles in every direction, walked to the door of apartment 4B and knocked, gently, 3 times. When the door opened, Lily's mother stood in the frame with wide eyes and the particular stillness of someone trying very hard to keep themselves from stepping backward. Behind her, Lily peered around her mother's arm with the direct, unself-conscious curiosity that only children and the very brave manage in moments of uncertainty. Deke looked at the little girl, and he knelt. The sound of that, a man of his size and reputation dropping to one knee on a worn apartment doorstep, was something several neighbors would quietly describe later as the most unexpected thing they had ever witnessed. Not because of the action itself, but because of what it meant, because of what it communicated without a single word being spoken. We see you. We came to see you. You matter to us in a way that doesn't require explanation. We don't forget debts, he said. His voice was low, and it was steady, and it carried the particular quality of a man who has said many things in his life, but who is, right now, being extremely careful to mean every word. And we never forget courage. He held out a package wrapped in cloth. Lily looked at her mother. Her mother, with hands that were not entirely steady, nodded once. Lily took it. Inside was a leather patch, small, custom-made, stitched with the precision of someone who had taken genuine time and care. Pale thread on dark leather formed a pair of delicate angel wings, each feather individually detailed, and in an arc above them, in clean block letters, protected. Always. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then, Lily, because she was 8 and because she had been raised by a woman who believed in the importance of acknowledging generosity directly, said, "Thank you. It's really beautiful." And Deke, who had not cried in a very long time and who was not about to cry now on a doorstep in front of 88 witnesses, nodded once, rose to his feet, and said, "You're the bravest person any of us have ever met, Lily Harper, and that's not something we say easy." They were gone within the hour, as orderly and deliberate in their leaving as they had been in their arrival. The street was quiet again. The fog had burned off. On the doorstep of apartment 4B, a small girl held a leather patch against her chest and thought about pinky promises and the way a heart has 4 chambers, and the fact that all of them, every single one, had been given to her today. 3 weeks later, Marcus came back. He came alone this time. No vest, no patches, jeans and a plain dark jacket, moving a little carefully still because the body remembers even when the spirit has moved on. He knocked on the door of apartment 4B in the mid-afternoon when he knew, because he had asked the right people, that Lily would be home from school. She opened the door and looked at him for a long moment. "You kept your eyes open," she said. "I did," he said. "Good." He had brought her something. Not a grand gesture, not a club gift or a symbol of anything larger than himself, just a book
a medical encyclopedia, thick and serious and clearly meant for adult readers, with full-color anatomical illustrations and detailed diagrams of every major system of the human body. Inside the front cover, in handwriting that was careful in the way that suggests the writer doesn't write by hand often, were 4 words. "For the future doctor." Lily read it twice, then she looked up at him. "How did you know?" she asked. "You told me," he said. "On the road. You talked for 20 minutes about being a doctor. I remember everything you said." She nodded slowly, processing this. Then she said, "Did you call your daughter?" He was quiet for a moment. "How did you know about that?" "You said her name," Lily said simply. "When you were drifting, you said it twice. I thought maybe she was why you had to stay." Marcus looked at this child, this impossible, extraordinary child, for a long time. "I called her," he said finally, "first thing when I could hold a phone." "Good," Lily said for the second time, with the same uncomplicated satisfaction. "That's good, Marcus." He stayed for an hour. He drank the tea that Lily's mother made with the slightly guarded warmth of a woman learning, in real time, to update a story she thought she already understood. He listened to Lily explain 3 full pages of the anatomy encyclopedia with the focused intensity of someone who has been waiting their whole life for someone willing to really listen. He laughed once, genuinely, rusty with disuse, when she pronounced a word wrong and then immediately corrected herself with perfect confidence. When he left, he paused in the doorway and looked back at her. "You know what you did for me?" he said, "on that road?" She shook her head. "You saw me," he said. "Not what people think I am, not what I've done, just me, a person, hurting." He paused. "Most people don't do that. Most people look and see what they expect to see." Lily considered this with the serious attention she gave to all things worth thinking about. "Well," she said, "that's their problem. People are just people." Marcus nodded slowly. His jaw worked once. Then he put on his jacket and walked back to his car and drove away, and Lily watched him go from the doorway with the leather patch in her hand and the encyclopedia under her arm, and a heart full of everything she intended to do with her one bright life.
Sometimes bravery doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come armored or loud or certain. It doesn't wait until the fear is gone. It shows up small and shaking, in a borrowed sweater pressed against a wound on a lonely road, in a voice that's steady even when the hands are not, in the simplest and most radical act a human being is capable of, refusing to walk away from another person's pain. Lily Harper was 8 years old, and she carried her dreams in a backpack full of library books, and she was scared. Genuinely and completely scared, and she stayed anyway. She stayed. And in staying, she did more than save a life. She cracked something open in a man who had forgotten he had something soft left in him. She reminded 89 hard